Well, there's so much of what was in this reading from Matthew that is not the kind of thing that we expect from the Prince of Peace. I've come to set a man against his father. Okay, happy Father's Day. And this, do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I've not come to bring peace, but a sword. Yikes. But, there are two ways of getting to peace, and they both involve swords. The first way is the Roman way. The Pax Romana, it was famous for bringing peace throughout the known world. It brought this Pax Romana, through the sword of force. It's a shortcut to resolving conflict for sure. There's a lot of problems with it, but one problem is that it seeds even greater conflict into the future because it hasn't really solved anything. The second way to peace, Jesus's way, brings peace through the sword of the Spirit. So it's not about force. It's about justice and about making actual changes that work better for everyone in the long run. It's a way that's longer, it's harder, but it is much more stable. Now, remember the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or the Truth and Reconciliation work that Archbishop Desmond Tutu did in South Africa. What that was about was people getting together in community, telling the truth about who had hurt them and what that effect had been. It was painful work, and then the perpetrators would sometimes they would make amends in very practical ways. Sometimes they would make sure that the person, if their livelihood had been taken away, was able to eat. And I don't know all the ways, but it helped that country to move beyond the great disruption and trauma of apartheid. It's called restorative justice. And we have restorative justice is practiced in Monterey County. In fact, we have some people in our parish that work with the restorative justice. And what that is, and let me just say right from the get-go, it doesn't work in every instance. Particularly in truly violent crime, this would not be the way to go. But in a lot of instances, it brings healing to both parties and change. So the person who was harmed tells the perpetrator how they were harmed and what effect it had on their life. And then the perpetrator makes amends in ways that are practical and helpful. It's healing, and it restores some sense of balance and justice. It doesn't, solve everything, but it restores community, and many times it restores the perpetrator into a different life, not a life of crime any longer. So restorative justice, that involves truth-telling and listening. So what all this makes me think of is that we are all being presented now with a divine invitation to hear the pain of racial violence and oppression, of systemic institutional racism that assault Black and brown persons. And hopefully, the hope is that the telling and the hearing will bring healing and change. And hopefully, we can, as a nation, and actually as a world, certainly as a church, and hopefully as a nation and as a world, choose the path of anti-racism in word and deed, and to make amends where that's appropriate. Now, one of our parishioners, Susie Brusa, is the CEO of Rancho Cielo, and she's done a lot of work for many years now in this whole area of anti-racism. So I've asked her to share some of her story with us and to help us learn more. So here's Susie.
Hi, I'm Susie Brusa, and I'm the CEO of Rancho Cielo. Over the last 4 years, the Rancho Cielo Board of Directors has studied systemic racial inequities in order to better understand the young people that we serve and consequently improve the programming. our focus has been on healing generations of oppression. We get at that by creating an environment where our young people feel as though they belong, they feel connectedness, they feel affirmation, and their cultural identity is praised. It's not colorblind, it's color appreciative. But in order to get there, we had to study systemic racism. Now, what is systemic racism? A simple example. 1 million black GIs returned from World War II, hoping to take advantage of the GI Bill. But the FHA underwriters, the Federal Housing Administration, part of the U.S. government, would not grant loans in areas where there was an infiltration of the races. They redlined those neighborhoods. Now fast forward, if you are not able to own a home, and you cannot build wealth, and you don't have equity, you do not have anything to pass on to the next generation. So white families were subsidized by our government, while black families were divested of wealth. The legacy of this is seen in the net worth of black families at approximately 1/8 the wealth of white families on average. We have inherited a system that is unfair, that disproportionately benefits some of us based on the color of our skin, and most of the time we're not even aware of it. We don't even know it. That's what you call white privilege. Now, it doesn't mean that any of us are racist, but we operate in a racist system that benefits some more than others, and the outcomes and the results are clear. I also want to say that there are plenty of poor white families in this country, barely getting by. But their skin color is not an added barrier, and our government has not oppressed them based on their skin color. So what do? We need to feel uncomfortable. We need to feel vulnerable. We need to demand more from our country and from others. Success will be found in your earnest willingness to do more than join a book group, to stand up for what's right, even when it's not convenient and it's not easy. It's not enough to ask your black friends to educate you on racism. You have to be prepared to do your own study, and you have to be prepared for the blowback and the heat that you're going to get. And that's where you'll feel uncomfortable. To absorb truths about blatant discrimination, even by our own government, during our lifetime, none of us ever knew anyone who was a slave, but we have known people who were not allowed in certain clubs, or certain restaurants, or movie theaters, or jobs because of the color of their skin. They weren't allowed to marry someone of a different race because of the color of their skin. To discriminate against someone or to not appreciate someone based on their skin color is to separate ourselves from God, because God made that person and their skin color. I like this little graphic, and I'm going to try to show it here, that shows the difference between equality, where everyone gets the same thing, and equity, where what you find are equal results. I hope that that's helpful. Next time we'll talk about diversity and inclusion.
So here's the thing. When we say that we love God and we follow Jesus, we're committing ourselves to some hard work and some long work, because Jesus calls his disciples to follow him to places where marginalization has rendered people sick, hungry, burdened. And not only to learn why that was happening, but also to bring life and healing into those situations. So the truth is that in this moment, the church, the Episcopal Church, the Christian tradition, the gospel, and the world events, lead us to move with urgency towards educating ourselves and towards dismantling systems that perpetuate and normalize racism in whatever form that might take. This is the kind of peacemaking, the sword of the Spirit, this kind of peacemaking that is a hard ask. It's hard work. But it's the ask of the gospel. It's the ask of Jesus, who loves us and who challenges us to live into the fullest and the best of all that God has made us to be. So we're going to continue. Susie is going to actually be back next week to talk with us more, and we will continue to explore this whole realm that has been opened up, I truly believe, by divine invitation to us.